Today, it's often said that intelligentsia's ethos is dead. And I will try to convince you that it is not true. I will start with a short definition of what I believe intelligentsia's ethos is. I defined it as a set of collective values, such as public engagement of the educated class and their commitment to the betterment of the society. Now, please take a look. On the first slide. It's an ancient god Prometheus who is holding a fire. Throughout the centuries, people used ancient mythology metaphors to describe problems they encounter. A relation between intelligentsia and the masses were often described by the myth of Prometheus. He was a hero who created a man from a clay and stole a fire to give it to the humanity. The fire was understood as a metaphor of enlightenment, which now we can understand generally as every kind of knowledge. In order to convince you that the intelligentsia's ethos is not dead, I will move back to the 19th century. As Olga Seran said, I'm 19th century historian. And the 19th century is believed that this is the era when the term was born and that our modern times were also born. And you can see another picture of Prometheus, and this is the dead Prometheus. And the title of the picture is The Polish Prometheus. And this is probably the way you think intelligentsia, maybe many of you think that the intelligentsia ethos is. So that means, the best way to contribute to your fatherland is to die for the fatherland. But luckily our ancestors also find another ways to contribute to the society. And the very term of intelligentsia appeared in Prussian Wielkopolska in 1820s as from the term intelligence. Intelligentsia in Wielkopolska decided to fight with what Prussians believed were Polish flaws, such as anarchy, chaos, and mismanagement. Those were just the counter-concepts of what they believed to be civilized. So, to have a good bureaucracy, to have a good management, and to be so-called solid. What's interesting is that the leaders of Wielkopolska intelligentsia consisted mostly of Catholic priests. That's why in historiography there was a debate even whether in Wielkopolska there was really a sort of intelligentsia. And those Catholic priests, in collaboration with local allies, started to establish saving societies, promoted entrepreneurship, and advancing agriculture. In Wielkopolska, throughout the 19th century, poor Polish peasants turned into modern farmers. In the beginning of the Polish Second Republic, it was said that there was so-called Wielkopolska's ethos. It meant values which were believed to give rise in capitalism in the West, so-called Protestant ethic. That is solidity, order, and entrepreneurship. Similarly, in Russian partition, intelligentsia engaged in established capitalism in the Polish lands. We remember that very well from the movie Ziemia Obiecana, The Promised Land. I would like to stress that Poland was the most industrialized part of the Russian Empire. Łódź and Żyrardów produced textiles which were exported to the world markets and were truly global cities in their own times. However, I'm describing you the Polish success story, not just in order to prove you that Polish history is unique, as many national historians do. My approach is that Poland is an integral part of European and global history with all its flaws and advantages. Thus, Polish intelligentsia's ethos has had also a dark phase. And I believe that this dark phase is a social exclusion. To start with, after the January uprising, Poles decided not to fight anymore and not to do any other uprisings. And in 1866, Polish intelligentsia in Galicia wrote a declaration of loyalty to Emperor Franz Joseph. The interesting thing is that the authors declared to transfer the civilizing mission, a truly colonial concept which Austria previously claimed to pursue towards Galicia. The concept of the civilizing mission was originally used by colonial empires such as Britain or France to justify their rules in colonies. In my PhD project, I will demonstrate how this concept of the civilizing mission was transferred and appropriated in East Central Europe in various contexts. One of the cases I analyze is how the civilizing mission was used by Polish intelligentsia to justify their rule in Galicia. As we know, Galicia was a multi-ethnic region. Poles lived there next to Ukrainians and Jews. However, Jews and Ukrainians were denied their national rights, as Poles claimed that they are not civilized enough. When Polish intelligentsia established public school system in Galicia as a part of their Enlightenment policy, they claimed that Yiddish and Ukrainian are not civilized languages to be languages of instruction. The same case was with universities in Krakow and Lviv, and when Ukrainians asked for Ukrainian language as a language of the instruction, also Polish authorities told them that it's not a language which would be appropriate to study. Now I will move to the definition of intelligentsia. I already mentioned a definition of intelligentsia's ethos. And this ethos is often mentioned as an element of the definition of intelligentsia. Next to the ethos, there is a representative and leadership role in the nation. So in nation building theories of Eastern Europe, it's believed that that was the intelligentsia as a class which had the main nation building role, in contrast to the state which had a main national building role in the Western world. And the third element is cultural mission. Today we mostly talk not about the civilizing mission, but a cultural mission. There was a kind of a change in the terms. And this cultural mission is not symmetrical. And this is very important because the intelligentsia is always defined in relation to other classes, to the masses, and it's a top-down relationship. For instance, in the Western middle class, we don't have this element of definition. It's usually defined by a level of education, income or wealth, or more qualitative studies are done on the lifestyle of middle class. And on the other hand, we have Russian intelligentsia, which has a component of social radicalism, and it's always anti-state. And in between those two models of Western middle class and Russian intelligentsia, we can locate our Polish intelligentsia. So I already mentioned 3 elements of intelligentsia definition, and to those 3 elements I would add my own element, which is, I believe that to intelligentsia's self-definition we should add that intelligentsia believes that it is a group between Western world and Polish peoples. While looking at my sources, my historical sources are my lab, there is always a discussion what is the West and what is the East. And in my approach, I believe that those were the socially constructed terms, but my actors believe that absolutely they are the West. And those were also approach which was done towards the Poles after the partitions. So Prussian and Austrian state legitimized their power and their rule in partitioned Poland in Austria and Prussia by civilizing mission. And this is the famous quote, "I will make attempts to familiarize these poor Iroquois," it's a kind of a tribe in North America, "poor Iroquois with the idea of civilization." And in a letter to a friend, Ela Kwiecińska mentioned that he believes that only intelligentsia are those enlightenment, while the rest stays behind the West. There were also some voices in 19th century Poland that actually the partition and the empires who did partitions of Poland were actually right. That this anarchy and chaos that couldn't have been maintained. And as we can see, Prussians, while looking at what happened and happens in Silesia, where the Polish peoples, dark, poor, decimated each year by hunger and diseases from one day to another, decline more and more, this way that soon no trace might remain from them. Prussians feel empowered to compare us with Indians. So this is the relation to the first quote. In the cities, industry and trade is almost completely in German lands. And what I showed you in the beginning was actually quite the opposite. So this is the view Poles had in 19th century. They had a view of backward land, periphery. They internalized this view which was imposed on them, which often did not correspond with the reality. So Intelligentsia's ethos had its many critics, and this criticism was mostly related with social exclusion, which I already mentioned, but this social exclusion was differently expressed throughout the last 2 centuries. So first critic of intelligentsia made Stanisław Brzozowski. He was very much read by the generation of solidarity movement, this left-wing circles of Adam Michnik and etc. And Brzozowski contrasted labor ethos to intelligentsia ethos. He believed that intelligentsia's ethos is just sitting around the fireplace and reading Mickiewicz and Sienkiewicz and dreaming about conquering Ukraine. Second was intelligentsia's ghetto, and Kwieciński compared intelligentsia to landlords for work. Third was criticism from the populism point of view, and the last one is criticism from the post-colonial perspective, that Polish intelligentsia is doing mimicry of the West and is not contributing enough to the society they come from. And So at the end, I would like to relate to the book of Piotr Kulas. This is one of the newest study on Intelligentsia. And what he claims is, although young members of the Polish elites are not calling, they refrain from the very term intelligentsia because they think it's this very posh, snobbish term related to this cultural mission. In general, they very much identify with the values such as commitment to the betterment of the society and focusing not only on mercantile values. Some other scholars also believe that intelligentsia ethos is not dead, that it's still much there, those collective values in non-governmental organizations, urban movements, and other activities which intelligentsia did in order to contribute to the society they come from. In conclusion, I will relate to Larry Wolff books. Maybe with some of you I talked about it. It's Inventing Eastern Europe. And in this book, Wolff argues that those were the Western Enlightenment thinkers who came up with an idea of the Eastern Europe as a backward space. And only in order to construct themselves as Western and civilized, those Enlightenment thinkers started to describe Eastern Europe as backward. And what was my main point is that intelligentsia also appeared along with this division between Eastern and Western Europe and is an integral product of modernity. And I think that for us, for Polish scientific diaspora, it's particularly important to understand what intelligentsia ethos was and can be. And also it can be an answer to your question how to move our expertise back to Poland and how to civilize our country and relate ourselves to the Western world. So thank you so much.